All right, so I'm going to walk through the logging demo now, which is the logging activity from Module 9. Okay. And my walkthrough is on a Ubuntu slash Debian instance. If you're using Red Hat, you can largely follow along, but the commands are going to be different. Okay, so make sure you look at the Red Hat instructions if you have Red Hat, CentOS, um, Amazon Linux, Fedora, and anything like that. All right, so the first thing that I need to do is let me talk about the purpose of this exercise before I get into how to do it. So the purpose of this exercise is to set up the Elastic Stack or Elk Stack to capture data from your Linux VM. So it's just going to be a simple exercise to stand up Elastic Stack, capture data from your system, and it's going to capture metrics using a tool called MetricBeat. And this will help you to understand the vast amount of data that a business can generate on a day-to-day basis from the information systems. Okay. Now, software like the Elastic Stack, Splunk, etc., are used to do analytics on the business and just understand, what's going on. Okay. They're also used by the technology teams to troubleshoot issues. All right, so I'm focusing on MetricBeat in this activity as the data collection mechanism, but there are some additional beats out there through Elastic that you can explore. If you choose to explore those, there's an extra credit exercise in Module 9. You do not turn in this activity, but you do need to do it. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to install Java on my virtual machine. And so I need to install version 4.15 or version 15. Those are the only ones that are supported by this version of Elastic. So on Ubuntu and Debian, I can install it this way. And that package isn't found. So let's do this. Actually, I'm in Debian. All right, so I figured out the issue and I wanted to explain what I did. So uh, on Debian, which is what I happen to have running here, the repositories for software don't have this particular package for JDK, whereas in Ubuntu they do by default. but this package is available in a different repository, so I needed to add the repository to my machine here in order for it to find the software. So I've written instructions on how to do this. So if you get an error message that says unable to locate package and then the package name, let me find it here. Right here, okay. Unable to locate package, OpenJDK 14 JRE headless. If you get that message, by the way, with any other package, okay, then you're going to follow similar instructions. Do some Googling. You'll figure out what package, what repositories that package is in. Then you're going to do the same process you did here, okay. Inevitably, someone will ask me later on when there's another package they need, how do I do this? You follow the exact same instructions. Maybe the repository you've already added will have it, maybe not, okay? On Ubuntu, the way that you do additional packages, repositories, excuse me, is a little different. So let me scroll up here on Ubuntu. If you find you need an update to a repository, you can add it using the add apt repository and then the repository name. Okay. That won't work on Debian. Okay, so if I go down here to Debian, what I did was I edited my Etsy app sources list file. Okay, I did that in VI. I added this line here, which I've put into the instructions, and I'm going to use the SID repository. SID is the unstable repository, so you generally don't want to use it for software. But since the software wasn't available elsewhere, I'm going to go ahead and make an exception and use it this time. I would recommend that you go ahead and remove it once you've successfully installed the package here. Okay. Now, it's very important when we install this, we want the headless. Okay. Headless means I'm not going to get prompted for a bunch of things. I'm not going to need to have what's called an X Windows environment to display graphics. Okay. Oracle's installers generally require a graphical interface, which I clearly don't have set up here. Okay. So I want to install it in a headless manner so it's not popping up, or, well, it wouldn't be able to anyways, but so it's not expecting that it would be able to pop up graphical interfaces on my computer. Okay. That's way outside the scope of this class, won't teach it to you. If you want to do things that have graphical installers, you either have to run a graphics environment, or you have to run X Windows on your machine and send the X traffic over the network to your local machine. Okay. It's far beyond what you need for this class. Not many people run graphical Linux anymore unless it's on their desktop. So we're going to skip over that. You're going to need the headless package, not the standard OpenJDK. So the instructions call for the headless. Okay, now I get the package, and it's going to install a bunch of things. Just say yes, and now it's going to go ahead and install this for me. Okay. And if you get prompted with a message like the one I have on here, read through it. Okay. So it's basically asking, it's installing some services which need to be restarted if libraries are upgraded. A restart is going to cause an interruption of service. Who cares? It's just your test box. No one else is using it. So for the case of this class, if you get asked about this type of thing, you can just say yes. You don't want to be asked each time, okay? In a real environment, you would probably want to choose no, okay? Because you probably don't want to interrupt service for your users. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and change this to yes, okay? And it's going to go ahead and install that. And while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to do something else on my other machine here. It's still going, so we'll give that a moment. Okay, so now it's asking me another question. Okay. A new version of the configuration file is available. but the installed version has been modified. Okay. What do I want to do? I can do any of these things, but I think that I'm just going to go ahead and use my local version, but I could see the differences. But let's just go ahead and see what the differences are. Okay. Okay, so if I look at the differences, okay, so my original version is the lines that are different are prefaced with a dash. And the ones that are from the new installation, they're prefaced with a plus. So I can see that in my original version, these lines exist, but they don't exist in the new version. And for the plus, the new version includes this thing, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so now let me go back here. And so it asked me, what do I want to do? Well, I don't want to get rid of the local versions because I have specific things that Google's expecting. Okay. So what I could do is I could do a merge between the versions, or I could just keep the local version. I'm going to go ahead and try to keep the local version for now, okay? Just to keep things simple. Okay. And we got an error. So this is where we're going to have to troubleshoot. Let's see if this is an error that we need to worry about. So now you have to give it a little more context to find an error that's relevant. So I'm trying to install OpenJDK 14 headless on Debian. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at this one. It seems to have installed okay, even though there are a couple of issues here. So let's just go ahead and proceed and see if it works. And if it works, we won't worry about this error message. So you can just go ahead and try to run the installer again. And if it says it's already installed, well, let's just assume it's going to work. Okay, move on. We'll find out soon enough if it doesn't work. So now the next step is I need to go back to Elasticsearch here and start the next piece. Actually, before I do that, if you made those changes, you have to, if you run into the issue that I had, you make the changes to that file, you run this update command, and then you go back to step 1 where you run the installer. Okay. Now for the download Elasticsearch, what I'm going to do is I need to copy and paste the command there. Oops. That is not it. Let me go ahead and open this in GitHub so we don't have these issues. if we go to learning resources here, module 9. Okay, so now let's go to this logging activity. Okay. So we're going to copy and paste this to download this Elasticsearch file. And curl is a way to download files. Think of it kind of like almost like a web browser. Now that we've downloaded it, we can go ahead and install it. Now, if we don't have curl installed, we get an error message, and we can install curl using this command. Okay, but I have it installed. Now I copy this D package, which will install this Debian/Ubuntu package here. Once it's installed, I'm going to go ahead and start the service. Okay. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to, hold on. Having an issue already, so we will not go on yet. So now, if we run into an issue, we're going to have to look up what the problem is. I didn't have any issues on my Ubuntu system, by the way, so Ubuntu users shouldn't run into this issue. Okay. Well, okay. Oops. Okay, we found the culprit to the issue here, but let me go back up. So first of all, the Elasticsearch has a config file, and we needed to specify our address to bind to as a localhost port, or IP address and a port. So on your side, let me go ahead and add this to the instructions. So here, where's that? Okay, so right here, call this? So you're going to modify the Elasticsearch YAML file. Right? And then you're going to change the IP to be 127.0.1. Change the value of network.host to be that. We're going to uncomment, remove from before network host. Then you're going to uncomment, remove the # from before http.port. And then the other issue we have here is something we can't solve on the command line. So when I run sudo journal control -xe here, we can see out of memory for Java. Okay. So in order to solve this problem, I'm going to have to go ahead and exit from my VM here. And now I'm going to have to go out to my console for the cloud and increase the size of my VM. I don't have enough memory here. So looks like I have a 2 gig by default. So temporarily you're going to have to resize this thing to make it larger. It doesn't need necessarily more CPU, it just needs more memory. So let's see what options Google offers us for changing the size of this VM. Unfortunately, we're getting close to the start of classes. I'm recording this, or the Q&A session, so it will take me a little longer to get this video out to you. Okay, so if I go out here to my VM, you can see I'm using a lot of resources on my VM. So I'm going to go ahead and look for Compute Engine here. VM instances. So what I'm going to have to do is let's go ahead and stop this. Okay, so now let me go here and let's go ahead and click on the instance. Okay, let's go ahead and edit it. And yeah, I just have a really tiny one here. Okay, so let's look and see what options we have. Um, Elastic search memory requirements. Okay, we're certainly not going to set it to 128. Let's see what the minimum is. Okay, 4 gigs is what you need for Elasticsearch. Okay. So let's just go ahead and we need a little bit more than that, simply because no, we don't want that. We want general purpose. We're okay with the right that CPU. Let's go ahead and do temporarily. You've got to remember to change this back when you're done with this exercise, though, or you're going to eat up your credits. 8 gigs of memory, okay? 2 vCPU should be fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now that I've saved this, I can go ahead and start this device. So now this device has 8 gigs of RAM, 2 vCPUs, okay, so now we're back in the saddle here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try, let me show you that file real quick that I told you I modified. So you'll see here I changed this to my localhost IP. I uncommented these 2 lines. And now I should be able to restart this. So 53. Okay, it started that time. Okay, so let me pause so I can start the cloud. All right, so where we left off before, I had just started the Elasticsearch service. The number's going to change on this, so I can't give you a step number, but I'll show you on the screen here. So I started Elasticsearch with I actually started it with something different here, so let me sudo right here. This is actually how I started it. Okay. Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to give you two different ways to start and stop this. All right, I hope that I stop sneezing long enough to finish this video. Okay, so we've got Elasticsearch started. And if we go back out to my documentation here, oops, wrong one. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, and I will fix the numbering here, it's a little screwed up and all this. We have this thing called ngrok. And so what ngrok allows us to do is ngrok allows us to access services running on our machine through the internet without having to open up public internet access to your virtual machine. Okay, so this saves you from having to go set up a firewall rule, set up a public IP address, etc. for doing a particular service. And so it sets up a reverse proxy. So the first thing we need to do here is we want to go ahead and sign up for an account. Now you can just sign up for the free account. That will more than meet your needs. Okay, so if we go out here, I have an account, so let me just go ahead and sign out first. Where's that? Okay. Now if I go here and say sign up for free, just ask me for my email, my name, and I set a password. Once I've done that, you can also sign up using your GitHub account, by the way, or a Google account. So if you don't want to have to create yet another account, you can sign up with those. Okay. And just authenticate using that instead. All a matter of personal preference. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this for a second. All right, so this is once you log in, you've set up your ngrok account, you have this dashboard that you come to. Okay. Now, a couple of things that we need to do here. Number one, my auth token shown here. When I'm done recording this video, I'm going to reset my auth token. It won't work, so I don't think anybody in this class will do this. I usually see this from other classes. But if you try to use my auth token, it's been revoked. It's going to be logged by this company. And I don't know what they will do, but I would assume that if they see malicious behavior, they might notify the law enforcement, probably the FBI. So, you know, I wouldn't screw around. If they think there's some sort of cyber attack, they might do something. Okay, so just, it'll be, my auth token won't work anymore. You'll have to get your auth token. Okay, but to do this in the class here, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how it is with my auth token. Okay, so the next thing that we have to do is looking at our instructions. We've set up our ngrok account. We can download it using this program called wget. Okay, very similar to the curl tool that we used previously. So we just go under our VM, we paste this line, and it says wget not found. Okay, So if I don't have wget, what do I do? Well, there's an answer to that. Unfortunately, it's down here. You can install it, and on Red Hat, you would use sudo yum install wget on wget. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install wget. And so this is how I installed it, sudo apt-get install wget. I will add that here. So, oops. Just a second here for that to update. Okay, so now let's go back here to where we're at. Okay, so now we need to install the software. So we can go ahead and do the wget. Okay, now we've downloaded it. So now we want to unzip it. So now we copy this line. We're going to unzip, which is a way of extracting it. Oops. Okay, so it doesn't know about unzip on this particular machine. So sudo apt-get install zip will include unzip. So we'll add that one to the list. So okay, going back here now. So we have installed unzip. So now we ought to be able to do this command we just were doing. There we go. We're good to go. Okay. Now what we want to do is we're going to move on to another step where we make sure that Elasticsearch is actually running. And we set it up earlier. So we're going to do curl http://127.0.0.1 9200. Well, that's the port that it should be listening on. And we can see that Elasticsearch is running because we got a response back here. Okay. So we can see the result right there. Okay. Now we can see, just as a side note, we can see what ports are running that are listening. If we know the port number, we can do this. Okay, we know that the system is listening on 9200. We can grep for listen and then grep for 9200. We can see that the system's listening on the loopback address here on port 9200. We can actually see any ports that are running on our machine here by doing this. Just grep for listening. So mine is listening on port 22, which is SSH. It's listening on 9200 and 9300. Okay. Now I can also see a lot of other stuff with netstat that really isn't super relevant to this example, but I'll just show you that if you don't grep for listen, you get a bunch of other stuff. Okay. Now, the next thing is we need to get Kibana. Kibana is the graphical interface for viewing our logs and that log data. So let's go ahead and we're going to download it with curl. And then once we've downloaded it, we're going to use a different program called tar to extract it. It takes a moment. Okay, so now we're done. Now we're going to CD into that directory. Now we're there. Okay. We're going to go ahead and start Kibana in the background. The ampersand there, little and symbol, that will throw it in the background. Okay, you can see it's in the background there. And now it's going to start showing log messages on the screen. Okay, if I hit enter, I go back to the command line. It's going to keep popping up log messages because this is running in the background. Okay, I want to make sure I wait until I see a log line pop up that says HTTP server running on whatever port here, 5601. So we might have to wait a few minutes for this to happen. Okay. Now I've given some instructions. If you run into issues, you can kill the Kibana process by looking for the process ID. Okay. And it's running, okay? We can see that it's running on port 5601. Now, the problem is it's a web interface. Right now, you aren't going to be able to get to it unless you open up public IPs. Okay? So now we can test to make sure this thing is running. We see it running, but let's just verify. So we can do a netstat -an grep for 5601 and grep for listen. And we should see something similar to what's on my screen. Might look a little different, but generally it should be fairly similar. Okay. Now what I need to do is I need to launch ngrok. So ngrok was one directory back. I had this directory called ngrok. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not actually a directory. Let me fix that in the instructions. So we can just get rid of that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run ngrok on our local machine here. So, So we're going to do ngrok auth token, and we need to give it our auth token. So if we go to our ngrok screen, we can see this is our auth token. If we need to change it because we shared it with someone else, we can go here to authentication, your auth token, and we can reset it there. Okay. So we want to make sure we get the entire auth token. We could just copy this line, by the way. Okay. So I could just do that instead here. Okay. Now I've got this auth token. Okay. Now what I can do is I can go ahead and fire up ngrok to forward this port 5601 on my local machine through ngrok so I can access it through the internet. Okay? So if I do ngrok and I want to forward HTTP and I want to forward on port 5601, I do that, and what it has done is it's now, because my machine can connect to the internet, my virtual machine is able to connect to the internet, but people can't connect to my machine. What it's doing is it's set up a reverse proxy here where it's forwarding all requests on port 5601 to the ngrok service on the web. So now I can take this URL here, copy it, and now if I open this up in my web browser, this is actually opening Elastic and Kibana on this machine here. Okay, so now we see their connections. Okay, and this is what's happening. I'm retrieving all of these pages, and something didn't work properly. I'm not sure what. Okay, so Elastic is set up. Okay, now for now let's just leave that as is. We'll come back to this a little bit later, but our web interface is now set up. Okay, so now we can just go ahead and Control C to get out of this. Okay. And let's move on with the next thing that we need to do. Now we have to download beats. Now for this activity, we're going to do what's called metric beat. Okay, and this is just allowing us to get metrics from our system. Now there are multiple beats, and if you go to Module 9, I have an extra credit assignment that's an opportunity for you to gain an extra 2% on your grade, and that would involve you doing things other than the metric beats which are required for this assignment. Okay, so if you want to do that extra credit, I would suggest that you not tear this stuff down when you're done. You do the other beats, install them. You'll install them a similar way. So now I'm going to go ahead and download metric beat. Here we go. We're doing that right now. And then once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and install metric beat. And then I'm going to go ahead and enable it after it's installed. And so now that it's enabled, I can set it up. It might take a while, so if it hasn't completed in 10 minutes or so and returned you back to your shell, you can go ahead and start a new SSH session. Okay. So once this is done, then I'm going to go start my metric beat service, and then I'll go back and restart ngrok. Now ngrok's going to give me probably a different URL than it did the last time, which I would then click on and open up in my web browser. Okay. Give it a second. All right, so while we're waiting for this, I'll go ahead and talk about some of the stuff. Excuse me. First of all, we have this host information that the Beats is going to capture. Okay? It's going to capture things like your architecture. Is it Intel x86? Is it AMD? Is it MIPS? Is it Spark? Whatever architecture of your system. ARM, if you're familiar with the ARM chipsets. It's going to have information like the boot time. Okay? It's going to have other information. Is it a container or not? What's the name of the host? What's your IP addresses? And this is the loopback address. This is your internal IP address. And then this is your IP version 6. We haven't talked about that, but these are IPv4 and this is IPv6. Not as popular right now. The kernel version you're running, what Linux flavor are you running or other OS, and what time zone you're in. And then this section is process information. So this will then have these things here, all these different attributes. Okay. And then let's see where we're at. Okay, so it's already loaded now. So now we go ahead and we start our metric beat service, which will then start sending data to Elasticsearch and Kibana. Okay, so now that's running. So now we can run ngrok again. We can say 5601, and since I'm not sure if it was exactly the same, we'll just test this theory that it's going to be different. Yeah, it's going to be different every time. So now we can just paste that in. Hit enter, and now I'm going to my Elastic Kibana instance here, which will allow me to go through and see the metrics for my system. Now, metric beats just does metrics. There are other beats out there that collect different types of data. Close that old one. This might take a while, so you'll have to be patient. Okay, so um, right now I'm collecting metrics. So if I go over here to the left, by the way, there's the ability to do security stuff as well. So you can capture things like threats and things like that. Okay. But if I go over here, I have a variety of different applications I can access. We've set up Kibana. So let's go ahead and do Discover. And so if I'm waiting for the data to pop up here, I can search on the data on my system. So earlier in the lecture, I believe I talked about, actually I didn't talk about it, it was in the lecture, not in the demo. I talked about the logs and how there's a lot of information in the logs, and sometimes it's difficult to find information in the logs. I can now do the equivalent of Google searches here. I can then go in and search for common things. Okay, so ActiveMQ is an application. I can search for things in logs about web response time. Let's see if there's any for Nginx. Nginx is a web server, so I can go in and look at requests from the Nginx server. Okay, you can see there's AWS logs it knows how to handle. Okay, presumably GCP is. Yeah, Google Cloud is here. So now if I set this up on all of my systems, I can ingest all of this information from across my business, have it all go to my Elasticsearch instance, and now I can search for, discover, and visualize everything in my business. I can see everything that's going on. Okay. Now, dashboard. Dashboard allows us to build a dashboard for our business. Okay. And so we can create a new dashboard, or we can go and set up an existing dashboard here. And if you look at this example, they have some AWS dashboards. I can set up a billing dashboard that gives me billing metrics. Okay? So I can point this to my AWS instance and have it collect information on billing. I can have it collected on S3. EC2, whatever I want to collect, I can collect that, and I can have a dashboard that I can have available to the appropriate people in the organization. Okay. I can do the same thing with a lot of other applications, as you can see here. Okay, so let me see if there's one for like just Linux. Nope. I don't see anything like that, but we can see what this dashboard would be kind of laid out for if it actually had real data and I was connected to my AWS account. Then I'd be able to see my estimated charges. I'd be able to see the top 10 users of the service. Okay, I hope that this is going to be very valuable for you to learn. Okay? If, as part of your project, you want to go out and do more detailed things with Kibana and Elasticsearch here, please do so. That's where you can get extra credit, is doing things above and beyond what I've asked for. Okay, so you don't need my permission. You don't need to ask me about it. Just do it. Okay, if you want to get some extra credit. And what you do with it, I don't care. Okay? I just want you to learn as much as you can. Let's look at what Canvas does here. Okay, so this is where we can, it looks like, set up presentation decks. Okay, so if we want to generate a report, we could pull data from the tool here, okay, and have it dynamically populate the data. Let's see here if we can find something interesting. So add from Kibana. Let's see if we get something in the system. So we could see our top services by top running services here in the last 15 minutes. Okay. We can lay it out here. Boom. And so then we could just we've got our little slide deck here. And we've got our live data view pulling from Kibana. So now when you present slides to the executives, you could have an interactive presentation with live data. Okay? Now, I will say this. If you want to set this up and use this instead of PowerPoint for your presentation, that is totally fine with me. Here's what you need to do though. Okay? If you're planning to use this instead of PowerPoint, you're going to need to send a video of you going through this presentation and use that in lieu of a slide deck. Okay, since the data will be live, you'll have to take a video of you going through your slides. Okay. So if you want to do that, you're welcome to do so. But if you're going to do that, make sure you have it feeding real data and there's actually real data on your system. One way you could do that, some of you are more advanced than others. One way is you could set up an Nginx server and just hit it with a web browser. Okay? And then you could see traffic hitting it in real time. Okay? Now let's go ahead and go back here. Oh, by the way, don't get impatient when it's loading. Don't just keep hitting refresh on the page. You'll kill your system. Okay? So I'm just going to wait for this to load now. And so now I can go down here to Maps. And I can set up maps of my systems and services. Okay. So I can go through and visually represent the services that I offer around the world. I could set this up. Okay. It can be very valuable for some organizations. Okay. The other thing that I can do here is I can do machine learning on the data and I can visualize the data. So I can create graphs of particular data. So if I picked system, which is the OS stuff that we are collecting, I can pick up something like let's just say service memory use over time. I don't know if there's going to be any data or not. No, we don't have any data right now, but we could build a graph here and then have this be part of our dashboard. Okay. Now we haven't set up some of these other things. Okay. So we haven't set up the enterprise search, we haven't set up this or the security stuff. But we could set this up. Okay. All right, so that is it for today's lecture. What you need to do after you've got this all set up is you need to be going through the Kibana UI, and there's a guide. Let me get back to the main right here. There's a guide to help you find your way around if you get lost. Okay, you need to explore the UI. You don't need to send me anything. If you choose to do the extra credit, follow those instructions. Okay. Now, if you're a Red Hat, Amazon, Linux, Fedora, CentOS user, you're going to need to go through these instructions, keeping in mind that not only would you potentially hit the same issues I did with Debian, you might run into other issues. Okay, if you run into other issues, you're going to have to Google them. Okay? I stated that early in the course. If you wanted to use a non-Debian, non-Ubuntu distribution, you are going to have to figure that out. Okay, I am not a Red Hat expert. I don't use Red Hat. I generally, and I'm not very familiar with it. Okay, so if you choose to go down that path, you might have different things that you need to do here. Now, if you encounter something and you find a workaround, you're certainly welcome to share that in Microsoft Teams, and then I can incorporate that back into the instructions. Okay. All right, so that's it for the demo this week.